In this video, we're going to take a look at Geno Auriemma and if he will retire at the end of next season, when likely Paige Bueckers moves on to the WNBA. I saw this question posed by Chantel Jennings of The Athletic in late April, but there was so much portal news going on, I sort of saved it for later and wanted to take a bit of a deep dive on it. It's funny, in that same article or mailbag, she also takes a look at if Tennessee is still elite after the firing of Kelly Harper and the hiring of Kim Caldwell. And that leads to the second question is I will take a look at what is the succession plan when Geno eventually does retire from coaching. As when a legend retires, much like Pat Summitt or a Geno Auriemma, it leaves a massive hole or vacuum in the program. And I'm curious what UConn's potential plan is to replace Geno Auriemma once he eventually does retire. Before we start, if you like the content, then please consider subscribing to the channel and giving the video a like. Now, to be clear, I obviously don't know when Geno Auriemma is going to retire. Only he knows that. But I do think it's a fair question to ask as he turns 70 in March this year. Tara Vanderveer, who is 70, just retired, but I would suggest her situation is a little bit different in terms of her team was, I think to be fair, with Kiki Arioffen leaving, it was going to be a rebuilding team as well. They were heading into a new conference, so it seemed potentially like the right time, and she had an elderly mother that she was looking after as well. I think that she wants to spend more time with, which is understandable, but it's always quite variable. So Coach K retired, I believe, at the age of 73, but then you had Jim Boeheim, who was sort of pushed out at the age of 78 or 79. And I think a lot of it just depends on mindset of where you're at. And the other one is obviously your health and where that is at as well. The two work hand in hand. And I think another article gave a pretty good picture of where Geno Auriemma is in terms of those issues in March of 24, again by Chantel Jennings. But she did a really long, informative story on Geno Auriemma, basically recapping how the 22-23 season was an extremely rough season, obviously for UConn, as Paige Bueckers was ruled out of the season even before it started, and then the injuries just piled up from there. And then for Auriemma, it was personally tough as his mom died in early December, which is always tough when, I mean, his mom was 91, I think, but it's always tough when your mother passes. It sort of hits home the reality of your mortality, no doubt. And then he had a health issue in December. It was actually reported that he was away from the team with an illness, but it was actually his coronary artery that needed to be unblocked. He had the procedure done, and he was actually back at UConn practice 8 days later. But when they were having a run through, I believe it was before Butler, Nico Mule just said, "Why are you here? You obviously don't look right. Like, you have other things on your mind." And he basically said to the coaches, yeah, I need to get out of here. And he took time where he just rested and unplugged and rejuvenated himself. He actually came back 8 days later. And the overall tone of the article is he's a little bit softer now in terms of management of players and things like that. But at the same time, he's not. Like, the little things still drive him crazy, which is why he's a great coach, obviously, because he wants all the small things that add up to be fixed, and that ultimately leads to success. The other interesting nugget that I found from the article is that essentially his coaching style is find what the player fears or what they're worried about and sort of really attack that and go after that, as that helps motivate them. And he says, I know it works because it works for me. And that's his insecurity of losing and not having success, which drove him as a coach. So he tries to find that thing for each player and use it to motivate them so they maximize their potential. But the overall take from the article is that his health is good and his mindset is good. So I would anticipate that he will continue to coach after Paige Bueckers leaves. If his team is competitive and they have Sarah Strong, obviously they will be. He's still bringing in top recruiting classes. And if his health is good, I just don't see him leaving. In the next 2 or 3 years, I could be wrong, but I don't see it. But at some stage, he will leave, obviously. And hopefully it's another 10 years and it's great. But we're all day to day in this life, unfortunately, and you never know when you'll need to retire from your job. So with that said, he will eventually retire from UConn, and that begs the question, what is the succession plan for UConn, especially in light of Tennessee and how they have struggled after Pat Summitt retired? I think that has to be of interest to UConn fans of what UConn will do after Geno, as it's a big vacuum. Will they go North Carolina, and would CD fill his shoes for a few years, much like North Carolina did with Bill Guthrie? Or do you think that Geno Auriemma and CD are a package deal? Chris Daly will leave when Geno Auriemma leaves. Like, she is younger than him. She's only 64. If he retired in the next few years, do you see her sliding over into the head coaching position and coaching 3, 4, 5, 6 years just to have that go at it, to show everybody how well she can coach, or just having her chance to run the program as the head coach? That would be fascinating to see. I would suspect she would go when he goes, but it's total speculation on my part, as I think she sees themselves as a package deal, that they help players develop together, and they're sort of yin and yang. I've heard her talk before that they sort of work together, that one's the good cop, one's the bad cop. They don't want to both be picking on a player on a particular day, but they sort of go back and forth. One's building a player up when one might be going after a player for what they're doing wrong in practice and things like that. If Daly does leave when Geno leaves, what do you see UConn doing? Well, do you think they'll definitely be, you have to come from the UConn family to get the position? Much like how North Carolina did all those years after Dean Smith, that you had to have played for Dean Smith if you were going to coach at North Carolina. And if that's the case, would they just hire somebody from the current staff like Jamel Elliott just to move over and take over the role as head coach? Or are they going to require somebody currently in a D1 program having success, like Shea Ralph at Vanderbilt, or maybe Carla Berube at Princeton, just because they've been used to running a program for a number of years and are having some success? Or do you see them going outside the box and just getting an unknown coach, much like Tennessee did, an up-and-comer from a mid-major school, or maybe an assistant? Again, I want to get your feedback on this and see what you think the succession plan would be. Do you think they will keep it in the family? And if they do keep it in the family, did you think it would be Berube or Shea Ralph or Jamel Elliott? Or do you think UConn's likely to go outside of, if you like, the UConn family and bring an up-and-coming rising coach? Or do you expect them to go big with a big name, something like a Jeff Walz from Louisville, or try to get a big name like that to fill his shoes? Again, all opinions are welcome. So, yeah, please leave your comments down below. Thanks a lot for watching. Hope to see you next time. Good night.